a driver like Lewis Hamilton or Max Verstappen can actually realistically expect his car never to break down once in a whole Grand Prix season. And so we have this bulletproof reliability.
When faced with failure, how can business leaders empower their team and learn from Formula One?
A very interesting facet of working in Formula One is that most of the time we're not succeeding. And even a team like Mercedes-Benz will admit that periodically they have an off weekend. And we've seen a few of those over the years where they'll go to a race and everything will just seem to go wrong over the course of the weekend. So even the best in the business will have an off day. And one of the things that I like to talk about is that our failures, I have a phrase, failure fuels future success. And what I mean by that is when you fail at something, you have a choice as to what you do with that failure. You can first of all descend into acrimony and blame and try to find someone to apportion blame to and say, well, if they'd done their job better, we would have succeeded. Or you can sit back and say, okay, so we tried to achieve this, we haven't succeeded. Where did we go wrong? What can we learn from that? And the moment you move into becoming a learning culture, where as a team you're really utilizing every single day to learn and improve as an organization, all of a sudden you end up on a trajectory of continuous improvement. And one of the things that I have found really fascinating about working with the really highly successful people in Formula One, Ayrton Senna, Michael Schumacher, Mika Hakkinen, Jenson Button, Lewis Hamilton, is that even when they win a race, they sit down and they look at all the data and they figure out, how could we have done better? Now, you might say, how can you possibly do better than winning? But the point is, if you win a Formula One race by 5 seconds and the data tells you that you could have won the race by 20 seconds, you can sit down and work out, where did that 15 seconds go to? So you're not only benchmarking your performance against the competition, but you're also benchmarking your performance against how well you could have done if everything had been absolutely perfect. So it's slightly wearying because it means that you're never satisfied, but actually that's part of the hunger and curiosity of being the best that you can be. And I think in any sport, and certainly in Formula One, we are inherently curious to know, could we do better next weekend? And I think that's what makes it so fascinating.
What can we learn from the way that Formula One handles strategy?
I think the most important thing that businesses can learn from Formula One's approach to strategy, or Formula One team's approach to strategy, is that we're willing to adapt, and we're willing to adapt very quickly. There's a famous old military phrase about the fact that, the best strategy never survives first contact with the enemy, and I think we see that in Formula One. Effectively, the moment the lights go out and the race starts, anything can happen, and so no matter what our plan was, we have to be prepared to change and adapt. And we see that almost every weekend. So the team will go into a race thinking that driver A will have 2 pit stops on these laps and driver B will have 2 pit stops on these laps. And actually within 5 laps of the start of the race, that's gone out the window because the weather has changed, or because a competitor has done something, or because one of your drivers has maybe made a mistake, or there's a technical problem with the car, or it could be any one of a number of hundreds of variables. So ultimately, the best strategy is the strategy that can be adapted to suit what's actually happening. And the teams that go into a race with a fixed strategy, this is the only strategy that we're going to run with, almost invariably get it wrong. And I think that, again, whether it's in business or in sport, is absolutely critical. And quite close to that sort of adaptability is a really important word, which is agility. So you need to be agile. And, Formula One does involve, excuse the cliche, but it does involve split-second decisions. And very often, and I've been there, where we're on the pit wall, we've got the headphones on, and the driver suddenly communicates and says, this has happened, or an engineer comes on the radio and says, we need to make a pit stop now, or
Mhm.
and all of a sudden the organization, and there's no point in us having a whole debate. We don't have time to go and have a committee meeting. So there has to be a quick decision.
Mhm.
Everyone is accountable. We know exactly who's going to make the right call, and we support them. And sometimes those decisions turn out to be the wrong ones because something else happens. But when we do our debrief after the race, we just sit down and we learn what happened from that. So strategy is ever evolving, and there are so many variables. And going back to my earlier point, because we operate in a fully connected, data-driven environment, we use a lot of data to help us to make the best strategic decisions. But fundamentally, the best thing companies can learn is that your strategy needs to be able to adapt to what's actually happening as opposed to what you thought might happen.
How would you define F1's data-driven business culture?
So Formula One started in 1950, so it's 71 years old, and for almost exactly half of that time, 35 years, we've been using data in some way, shape, or form. So it's 50% of the sport's history is a digital transformation journey. And initially, we started using the ability to gather data to try and find out how to make the car go faster. And then in 1994, we had a double fatality at the San Marino Grand Prix, and the two drivers were Ayrton Senna and Roland Ratzenberger. And those two fatal accidents led to a complete rethink in Formula One about how do we use information. And of course, the airline industry has been using black box data recorders. The airline industry has been using black box data recorders for 40 years to analyze previous accidents so they can improve future safety outcomes. So in 1994, Formula One basically borrowed that model and we supercharged it. We didn't wait until an accident happens before we analyzed the data. We started using real-time data to manage risk and improve performance. And that's what's led to the safety revolution that we've seen for the last 27 years. It's extraordinary to think that between 1994 and 2014, for 20 years, we did not have a further driver fatality. Unfortunately, we then did have one at the end of 2014, Jules Bianchi. And it's actually caused our industry to reflect on the fact that no matter how good you think you are at managing information and particularly managing risk, that actually the risk itself never goes away. It's still there waiting for you to get it wrong. But the data-driven environment of Formula One has revolutionized risk management, safety, reliability. Let's take reliability. So between 1950 and 2000, Formula One cars broke down 45% of the time. It's an extraordinary statistic, but almost half the time they just broke down. They didn't even finish the race. Now in 2021, a driver like Lewis Hamilton or Max Verstappen can actually realistically expect his car never to break down once in a whole Grand Prix season. And so we have this bulletproof reliability. And again, that comes from using data to drive improved outcomes in terms of quality of design, quality of outcomes, reliability, durability, product lifecycle management. It's got a whole raft of things. So it's very hard to live in Formula One at the moment or to have a conversation with anyone without someone bringing up data, because it is a data-driven environment, and we just regard it as a suite of digital tools that enables a group of human beings to do some pretty impressive things.